Dan in Michigan.
Hey guys.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Okay.
Cool. So I'm a theist, but I'm kind of in the middle of kind of questioning my beliefs and everything.
Mm-hmm. We've had a few email exchanges about Jehovah's
exactly.
Witnesses.
So one issue I've been kind of having is in my attempts of, going to the websites, I go to your guys' wiki, I go to the Rational one, the
Sure.
Infidels, I believe.
Yeah,
and
ironchariots.org is ours.
Yeah. I've been having the problem feeling like it's more cynicism than skepticism. And it's been something that's been, and I know that there's issues where I don't want to let go of my beliefs. I have cognitive dissonance like everyone, but I sometimes just think, okay, this is someone that is just, it's like, it reminds me of my sister when there was a girl she didn't like, and it was like, did you hear what she said and how she said it? And I just remember thinking, whatever, you know what I mean? You're just being a catty girl right now, and I just want to get your guys' thought on that.
On your sister?
No.
So yeah, you know what I'm saying. Like when I read, okay, like for example, the Skeptics Annotated Bible about contradictions in the scriptures. So many of them I just read and I go, okay, come on, like are you really reading these in context? Because they're just
okay. No, I understand.
Like
I understand what you're saying. Okay, so what you're saying is that you'll look up these, like there'll be something like you want to look up slavery in the Bible, and you'll get like 3 or 4 instances that are solid, and then you get like a few that when you go and read the context a little bit more, you think they're stretching it, right? It's like, wait a minute, that's not quite, that's not quite slavery, or that's not quite. Yeah, and I've seen that myself. I do think sometimes the examples are not what I would call solid. And I think that's fair when that happens for anybody, theist or atheist, to call that out, to basically say, when you're going to give, like for example, if I were advising like an atheist who was going to use that source, right, I wouldn't advise them to go in and just copy paste all those examples. I would say you're going to have to go in there, you're going to have to look at those examples, you're going to have to check them. And if you want to use them, you're going to have to know that they're solid before you put them in. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to hand this argument or this example of something that you think is atrocious that's in the Bible over to your theist buddy that you're debating, and they're going to come right back and tell you that you didn't read it.
Yeah.
And you're going to look bad because you're going to go in and read it and see that they're correct, that it was a bad example. Yeah.
I recently heard Matt, I believe it was Matt, speaking about the provision in the Old Testament where when the slave was to be freed in the 7th year, that there was a provision that he could become a lifelong slave. And the way he was saying is, here's a loophole so that you can keep someone back under your control. But I don't believe that. I don't believe that it's slavery in the context that.
Well, I mean, hang on. You realize that the loophole that Matt was talking about is that they can actually hold your family hostage when they say you're free.
But can I finish my point first about that? So I personally, I know the word slave is used and everything, but I don't view it as slavery when it's a completely different time. People they couldn't go work at Best Buy, they couldn't go work at McDonald's. Like agriculture was pretty much the main form of work for anyone. So when they got into debt and they had to go into what's used or called slavery, it wasn't the same as slavery where
wait.
Put you on a
you
boat
could beat the person. You could beat them. Do not tell me that this is not slavery when the person who, quote, owns you can take you out and beat you near to death. And if you don't die in 2 or 3 days, if I die a week later from the injuries, he's not even guilty of a crime. That's not slavery? How much more could you own someone than being able to legally go out and beat them? You can't even do that to a dog.
I know exactly what you're saying, and I've had that issue when I read these, and that's the kind of stuff that makes me.
That is owning a person. I mean, I don't know how much more you could own a person. You could have sex with these slaves. I mean, This is owning a person.
But if someone was harshly dealt with their slave owner, and the 7th year comes, what keeps them from sticking around, and why is it? Well, that's a loophole.
Well, not 7th year if they've already agreed to be a slave for life, and there are no more loopholes left, and then they get beaten. What recourse do they actually have under this law?
Because the law says if they actually love their master and they want to reside with their master forever, them and their household, that they make that decision, not the master.
Does the fact that...
Wait, no, do you really think that it is okay to have an institution that allows a person to own another person up to the point that they can lay hands on them and beat them near to death? Yeah, or basically have sex with them. That you should be able to do that with a person, whether they consent or not.
I don't know where the rape reference comes from, but...
It's having sex with your slave who cannot refuse. I mean, that would be... I can see how somebody that's into the Bible might not call that a rape, but that is a rape. I mean, when you have sex with someone who is not allowed to refuse you, that's rape.
I guess this is my overall point, is you just can't say that, like, you know exactly the context of that day and age. And when the scripture says it's the slave's choice, it's their choice if they love their master.
After so many years. But they are still owned to the point that you can... I mean, I cannot even believe that I'm having a phone call with somebody who thinks that it's all right to have an institution where I am legally allowed to beat a person near to death or have sex with them without their consent if within 7 years we ask them if they want to stay with me. How is this acceptable?
Hang on, Dan, you're not arguing that this institution would be okay to bring back now in modern society, right?
Why not?
Well, because for starters, we live in a different world. Like I said...
What does that mean? Transactions are transactions. Business is business. Human beings are human beings. I don't know what you mean it's a different world. We still do business today.
I kind of think that should my
employer be able to come and beat me if they don't like the job that I do?
Well, can I clarify my position then?
I just want to say that I kind of think that the fact that this used to be considered okay and now because it's a different world it's not okay implies that the biblical moral code... At least that particular part of it, even if you're going to sit here and argue that it was once okay, which I wouldn't agree with you, but even if you were going to take that position, you're taking a point of view saying, we've outgrown that stuff. The stuff that used to be considered moral in the Bible makes no sense given modern sensibilities. That anybody who would try to get their morality from the Bible today has to go to great lengths to reconcile that. I mean, you can't just straight up say the Bible is the source of all morality without confronting that issue. Can we agree on that?
I see what you're saying, but I still think, like, Tracy's saying, I cannot believe I'm talking to someone that says it's okay to beat someone.
Well, I'm with her.
I haven't said that. What I said was, when I read scriptures like that, I do think to myself, okay, now that's where I start.
Yeah, but you're saying this isn't slavery, and I'm saying if you have the legal right to beat the person up,
well, okay,
how do you say that isn't a slave?
Because I'm saying, okay, let's use the example. Let's just take the beating out of the situation.
Why? It's part of it. It's a very big part of it. You own the body. You own their body.
I still think that what you guys call slavery and basically equate it as the slavery that we're used to, Are you okay? But
wait a second. If you're simply saying that there are different forms of slavery, fine. But to say that I can own a human being and beat them and the law protects me as the owner and I can beat them and if they die within a week, I haven't committed a crime because that was my property, that is slavery. I don't care if it was the same slavery that we had in the U.S. South. The slavery we had in the U.S. South, to be honest, was based on the biblical model, but that changed later, in fact, because of some lawsuits that caused some changes. So, for example, it used to be in early slavery here in the U.S., for example, if the slave was fathered by the master, it was considered not to be a slave. The offspring was considered not to be slave because that's how the biblical model was set up. But we then changed that here in the U.S. because that was a problem, right? You don't want your offspring with the slaves to not be your slaves. So they changed that around a little bit. And so we developed a different form of slavery. I agree, our laws were slightly different. But when you have a person that is in your, quote, employ, that you are allowed to beat literally to death, that is a slave.
And I don't think that's right, honestly. I don't.
But you can't say that's not slavery. How do you say that's not slavery?
Because, okay, just take this with a grain of salt, but I believe that if the God of the Old Testament is true, which I know you guys would scoff of that, but if that God is true, then the law was written in relative perfection. What I mean by relative perfection is it was written for imperfect
relative
people.
Perfection seems to be
but
kind of an
oxymoron. We are the same people, right? We're human beings.
No, the world is 100% different.
I'm not talking about the world. I'm talking about people, okay? We are not significantly evolved to the point that we are different species from what existed then. There is no reason that a God could not explain to people back then, you don't beat somebody else to death, right? There is no reason that they would be incapable of grasping a law like that. People that could be killed for having homosexual sex because of the law could definitely be told you're not allowed to beat people, right? They can understand that. Don't tell me they could not understand that rule.
Well, and I know you don't agree with the rule, but
they could understand the rule. They were not so imperfect they could not understand don't beat people.
I know what you're saying, and I totally get it. But like again, going back.
Do you think it's correct? Do you think that they could understand a law that said don't beat people who work for you? Do you think they were that clueless that they couldn't understand that?
See, but then I'm saying, then I'm putting, if I say yes, I agree with you, then I'm putting I'm saying that, like putting the burden of proof on myself saying, well, then there was no justification.
I'm not worried about that. I'm just looking at this one point. Do you believe that the Hebrews in that day and age, that the Hebrews thousands of years ago would understand a rule that said, do not beat another human being that works for you? That's all I'm asking.
They would understand that, but what I'm saying is it possible that there was some moral justification for having a regulation where
Dan, I'm going to take a step. Give me a minute to take a step back and talk about morality in general. I think religion, the problem with religion, and Jehovah's Witnesses in particular have a whole host of things that I object to. We already talked about the blood transfusion issue, and you didn't agree with that either. But I think when you're dealing with religion in general, it relies on the notion that there's this ultimate lawgiver who hands down things by fiat without reason. And the reason that I feel like you're twisting yourself in knots to defend this thing as not really slavery, which I think if it wasn't your religion, you wouldn't be doing. You would take a look at this other book. Let's say the Quran said something that sounded terrible. You probably wouldn't go out of your way to defend the Quran and say, well, maybe if we look at it in the context of 9th century
like marrying a 9-year-old.
Middle East. Then it wasn't really bad.
I believe
I'm saying
that my original...
what we object to overall is the assumption that you should take on faith this one source and do whatever you can to believe it and justify it, instead of taking a step back and saying, what are the reasons that I think this thing is moral and not moral? What would the consequences be of acting one way instead of another? And try to figure out what your goals are with morality, whether it's helping people have a good life or whatever. And saying, how does this action advance or not advance my particular goals? Because I think that when you're dealing with secular morality, the fact that it said something, that it said to act a certain way in a particular book doesn't matter. You don't have to fight for it. You can just take things on a case-by-case basis and decide based on principles what's right or not.
But I believe that like we've digressed from my original point too, where let's say I'm living in Israel, I'm a slave, and I have a master that beats me for just about anything, and he loves the fact that he can beat me. Well, come the year that
I don't care.
Debt has been paid,
I don't care about. I don't care. Look, Dan, I don't care about your justifications and your ways of trying to find excuses for the Bible. I'm saying, to me, the Bible, what the Bible has to say about morality is irrelevant. It's not useful today. Arguably, I'm agreeing with Tracy that it wasn't really a good moral system then, but it's definitely not a good moral system today. And dealing with, like, trying to hold on to your faith now and trying to reconcile this stuff, I don't think is really progressing you towards a better understanding of the way the world works or the way that you really ought to behave as a modern person.
Okay, but so can we answer the question though? Like,
no, because I don't care.
Cynicism though, but is cynicism the same as skepticism?
No.
So do you at least see that I'm saying like there is a lot of cynicism when it comes to what is called skepticism on these books?
I don't necessarily see it as cynicism.
I don't either. I don't know how that's even related.
I think it can appear to be cynicism if it is undermining or dismissing things that you've taken seriously in your whole life.
Beat people.
I do too.
Right? I don't think that's cynical at all. I think it's cynical to try to excuse beating people.
Okay, but then answer my question that Scripture never says that you refer to. Never says it as a loophole, but you take it as a loophole. You say, well, here's a good loophole so that...
Right, because what they're saying is you can leave, but you have to leave your wife and kids behind. And a lot of people would not be willing to do that. So, yes, that would be a loophole that allows you to coerce this person to stay. If you're holding their family hostage, how do you not call that like a coercive system? You're being coerced. That's a loophole. You're forcing this person to stay. If I've got your family hostage and tell you to do something, do you think you did it of your own free will, or do you think I forced you? Of course I forced you. The law is not going to look at it.
I know what you're saying. I agree with what you guys are saying.
It absolutely is a loophole. It is a way to force a person to stay even though they would want to leave. Like you said, if your master beats you all the time and you would normally leave, but you know that you have to leave your wife and children there, you might not leave, right?
Despite the beating.
So it is a loophole that allows you marry him off, you give him a family, and then you tell him if you don't stay, you have to give up your family. That's a pretty big give up.
Okay, right? So it's just so it seems like at least though the only thing that I think that we've agreed on is that there are instances though where maybe there is a stretch to show like here's a contradiction or here's something.
Yeah, I've seen really bad examples of people that are saying this is a contradiction, and I look at it and I'm like, no, it's not.
I agree.
You didn't think it through.
And atheists,
so, yeah,
I think that more important than dismissing religion and promoting atheism, I feel like what is the most important is that people exercise good critical thinking and skepticism and think about why they believe things instead of just taking them at face value. And I think sometimes atheists do have favorite sources that they will accept at face value and not think too hard about them, and they will wind up being embarrassed when those things turn out to be provably wrong. And atheists should not do that any more than Christians or Jehovah's Witnesses should do that. So we are in agreement there. You're right.
Yep.
So what do you guys recommend to deal with cognitive dissonance and like compartmentalization and the
when
like?
You recognize it's happening, you have to think it through. You have to look at what you're looking at. And
Dan, we're out of time, but I'll talk to you some other time. There is no show next Sunday because it's the 5th Sunday of the week. Sorry, guys. I'll see you, Missouri people, and thank you, Tracy.
That was fun. I got all riled.
All right.
Good atheist, bad atheist today.
That's right.
That was our routine.
I can't hold her back. All right, bye. See you next week. El Arroyo.